Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you may be. My name is Bayo Adewusi. Our numerous creative writers and artists owe a debt of gratitude to anyone or organization that makes it possible for them to reap the fruits of their labor. Oftentimes, creative people churn out materials which others pirate and leave them not only poorer in material terms, but less fulfilled. For the last 2 decades, a regulatory body, the Nigerian Copyright Commission, has tried to fulfill that role, fill that void. The Director General of that organization is my guest today. You'll meet him if you don't go away. My guest is a lawyer and a renowned scholar in the field of intellectual property law. Before his appointment as Director General of the NCC, he had taught law at the Faculty of Law, Lagos State University since 1991, where he pioneered intellectual property law. His worldview is eclectic and he has published many works that have contributed to the development of intellectual property jurisprudence in Nigeria and worldwide. He belongs to the standing committees of many international copyright organizations. Please welcome Mr. Adewepo, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission. Mr. Adewepo, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
You're no stranger to this program, but this is a special occasion since your organization has attained maturity, so to speak. You are celebrating 20 years of your existence, and many Nigerians are really being skeptical and wondering, is there really anything to celebrate?
Yes, just like any individual would do. I mean, a 20-year-old person on attainment of 20 or even 21 asks himself, have I really done well as an individual? Have I attained my goals in life? And that does not mean he cannot have a party of some sort or a parley of some sort, to mark that occasion. So the same will go for an organization. Any organization that is 20, whether corporate or not corporate, can actually sit back and say, let's see how we have fared.
So is this time, would you say, for reflection?
Yes, it is, really. I mean, in that context, we can say that we should sit and reflect on the 20 years of evolution of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, not the law as such, because copyright law in Nigeria is as old as 1912 if you go back to the legal history. But then as a commission that is responsible for matters affecting copyright in Nigeria, I think we can use 20 years symbolically. You cannot be 20 years more than once, to sit and look at the mandate, look at the vision, look at the mission, look at the various efforts, look at the challenges, look at where we've had drawbacks or setbacks. And I think that's the time for us to do that.
Oh, okay, the commission by itself has gone through different twists and turns, from being established by a decree to its birth as a commission. Now, let me begin with the challenges. What has been a greater challenge? Lack of adequate financing, or the poor public perception of what intellectual property entails?
Both, but really the greater is the latter that you mentioned. Because when you put money matters, in Nigeria is everything about money and all that. But even if you have all the money in the world and you don't know what to do with the money, and you don't know to go about to deploy those resources, I mean, it means nothing. But let's talk about copyright and the larger system called intellectual property in Nigeria. One is an esoteric subject matter. very esoteric. Very few people understand the subject matter. They don't know how it operates. Even many so-called right owners, who we can say they are copyright owners in their own right, don't even understand what that means. So there's a problem of knowledge, there's a problem of capacity, which translates to capacity not just on the side of the right owner, but on the side of the institution itself, which is the Copyright Commission and other relevant institutions administering intellectual property in Nigeria. There's a problem of capacity that is in terms of human now and material, capacity to enforce the law, capacity to administer the law, capacity to know all the rudiments of copyright administration. That is very key. For instance, you have a commission that is responsible to enforcement of the law. Remember, was added into the mandate of the commission just about 10 years or so thereabout in 20 years evolution. At that time, piracy has grown into an industry, into a huge industry. Then can you say that the commission has been adequately empowered to carry out enforcement in the same sense in which you can say Nigerian police today, which is the primary law enforcement agency in the country? So that's a question that you have to ask, and you pitch that challenge against the efforts of the commission in the recent past in enforcing.
Sorry to interrupt you right there.
Yes.
Would you like to be empowered to the level of the Nigeria police, for example, in enforcement?
That's a political question. Technically, as a scholar, before I became DG, I can say, I've written extensively on that to say that, look, why not? Or at best, you have what you call anti-piracy squad embedded in the Nigerian police force, so that you can draw from it, but then again, it's not easy when your government is so huge and people don't understand how government operates. And dispensing all of these resources is something that you must be able to do. Carrying arms by copyright officers is a big question. How can a copyright officer carry arms? Because there's been a question that since you are a non-arms carrying enforcement agency, how can you perform your function? So give them arms to carry. That's a serious question. You don't put arms in the hands of somebody who doesn't know how to use arms. Then again, assessing the various agencies and other things, because they don't understand copyright. It's not their primary function. The person who is entitled, empowered to do this is the Copyright Commission. So we need to deal with that. We need to empower more in terms of not just funding, in terms of capacity, in terms of being able to build the necessary infrastructure that you carry. I remember in the history of legal history of the commission, enforcement was thrown or dispensed with, because at that time, probably the Office of the Attorney General of the Ministry of Justice didn't want to carry on enforcement. Because if you look at the US or other countries, you see it's usually justice that enforces, that prosecutes and enforces. They don't want to deal with that. Now, okay, this institution is there. Why don't you just give them that function beyond administering? So that's why we have copyright inspectors that are supposed to inspect, policing the entire length and breadth of Nigeria. That is a Herculean task.
But evidently, sir, that hasn't worked handsomely. The enforcing and policing hasn't worked handsomely. What are the other routes that you might like to consider?
We believe very strongly that the foundation of dealing with such an esoteric subject matter like this is public enlightenment. We need to build a new culture of respect for creativity.
So, did the founding fathers probably just jump the gun, importing to Nigeria what was obtainable elsewhere in the world without Nigerians having the necessary growth and maturity to deal with such a subject? Because you said it's esoteric. The average Nigerian is thinking of how to fill his stomach, how to, dealing with the challenges of power and other such things. So, is the Nigerian Corporate Commission ahead of its time?
We may well say that, but I think part of the process of development and evolution of any nation is to build the structures that will enable it reach its required destination and fulfill its aspiration as a country. And I think in the world today, we're talking about knowledge economy. The entire global community is dealing with knowledge and how to transfer knowledge, how to harness knowledge for its developmental purposes and aspirations. And intellectual property has come to the forefront of global development today. So I will not say that we're ahead of our time, but this is the time that we can actually begin to harness the vast human potentials and human resources that abounds in this country, which forms the building block for intellectual property development in Nigeria, and be able to transfer them to our developmental goals. I believe very strongly we have the potentials to do that, but transferring the potentials to reality is a challenge that we have right now.
From my cursory assessment, the players in the field, the movie makers, the artists, do not really seem to understand what copyright really entails. For the benefit of such people, can you tell us, if, for example, I produce a song, or I shoot a film, or I put together what I consider a novel, what should be the appropriate thing for me to do?
You know, in creativity, first of all, what you do is that you, in any area, whether it's a book or a music or and all that, you create the work, and copyright recognizes the author first of all in the different levels of ownership as the primary or the first or the initial owner of that work. But again, the work can be exploited through various means, through translation, through publishing, through performance, through reproduction. There are different streams, of activity that can fulfill the destiny of that work in that sense. Then you have the second or secondary layer of owners, which could be licensees, which could be assignees, and marketers, distributors. But it's important that the whole lot of transaction that surrounds that creativity must be well understood. First, it's a private right.
But by private right,
it means,
what do you mean?
It is a right of the author or the owner, so to speak, and nothing more than that. The only involvement of the state represented here, maybe government or the Copyright Commission, is in public interest, in the area of criminal enforcement, where you criminalize the infringement. Then it can come in to provide a support for the primary enforcement, which is in the domain of the right owner itself, who is the private owner, or even personal, because copyright itself is personal to the owner. That's how deep and intrinsic that thing is personal to him, and is obliged under the law to deploy every means and resources possible to realize the destination and destiny of that work. So you can see the challenge here, and they also have different challenges. If, for instance, a music is wrongly used, the right owner has a right to file suit, has a right to enforce, has a right to initiate proceedings according to law to ensure that he gets damages, he gets necessary relief under the law. Those are the basic things. And under the law, there are two levels of enforcement. You have civil enforcement and criminal enforcement. The bottom line is that these two should work hand in hand. How many enforcement have we seen in Nigeria? How many creators, authors, producers have we seen in Nigeria carrying out enforcement to its logical conclusion to prove a point, if that point should be proved, that I have sued this infringer, I have sued this infringer to court, and I have taken that case to its logical conclusion? That should be seen. That can even serve as public enlightenment, to see that this thing is important and this thing can actually work in Nigeria. So it's important that we stop paying lip service to enforcement. And if we have challenges in that area that is actually hindering the proper enforcement of the law, public enlightenment can really fill that void, or complement the enforcement purposes. And I think by the time we engage on a massive enlightenment in our airwaves, in everywhere, and the ordinary Nigerian, who is the market? I mean, the marketplace for piracy is Nigerians. They're the one patronizing pirated materials. If you can take that gospel to them to say, look, for every single pirated CD or DVD or book you are buying, do you know that you are destroying the economy? Do you know that you are reaping the authors off? They cannot create further, they cannot reap from with. And your favorite artist that you are buying, you are not even helping the artist. I think that message, that slant, not just coming from the Nigerian Copyright Commission.
We talk about infringement and pirated copies, but the bottom line is that those pirated copies, the ones you buy in traffic, the books that are printed without the author's consent, yes, come far cheaper. And so to the average Nigerian, he doesn't see why he should spend. Why would I buy a CD, for example, for 5,000 naira when I can get the same thing that sounds almost the same thing to me for 200 naira?
That is another challenge to copyright enforcement in Nigeria, which is outside even the domain of copyright administration. It's a larger societal problem that we have to deal with, that we have no direct solution to that. The only solution that we can have in that area is, okay, let's have distribution network. Maybe it can reduce the price. But then again, there's no way the price of a pirated material can match the price of the original. It's not, because there's no rights, there's no overhead and all that. So it can match, but it can only reduce the margin. But that's part of the society problem, because an average Nigerian can relate more with a cheap CD. And that's a problem that we are facing in our challenge. Unlike in other kinds of war, maybe the drug war, where you can say it's a matter of life and death, don't buy counterfeited Panadol. It's going to kill you. But in this case, eventually, yes. But here in this case, no way. I just want to listen to the music, even if the CD is bad. I listen to the music. I buy another CD, it's just 100 naira. Now, it has gotten to a ridiculous extent that the price of an empty CD, nothing inside, blank CD, is higher than the price of a CD with music or with film inside it. That's the level.
What does that tell us?
It tells us that the problem we have at hand, it's a time for us to say, okay, in marking the 20th anniversary of the commission, let's sit down and support the commission in all of its efforts in public enlightenment domain, in enforcement, and in all the other fronts. And let's stop shifting the blame from one another, because here you have people fighting another because of one thing or the other. No, that's not the time for it, because we have the same goal. The goal is for the creative community to prosper and produce more for the betterment of the society. So why don't we face that and see how we can pull this through for the betterment of our country?
Yeah. So you as an individual are very passionate about this cause, and so is the organization that you head. You see this as a big national epidemic, but how do you bridge the divide? How do you and your commission make the average everyday Nigerian see that this is not something that just affects the artist and the creative people and your commission, but this is something that affects all of us and requires the effort of all of us to solve?
Awareness. Great awakening. Great awareness. Look at corporate Nigeria. Some of them, in fact, many of them, relying on the use of these creative products, music, film, to promote their product. They need to help. That's where the funds are. That's where, and we're talking about all of these funds all over the place. And this is a just cause, if only for the sake of corporate responsibility, where they will pay an artist a couple of millions of naira to use his music. You can as well take a bigger look at that, not just an artist. Say, okay, this is where how we're promoting our music. Let us help the cause of intellectual property and copyright in Nigeria. And we can draw a lot of support from that. Because if you go to the industry, the creative community, they're also suffering, frankly speaking. They are. I mean, how do you tell an artist who is, as you have rightly said, just struggling to get by and to create, and it's not even getting his due from that creativity, and you have the big corporate entity using it to promote his business in millions and billions, turning out billions and billions, every year. So I believe that corporate Nigeria can assist in this cause, can assist a lot, and it will also help the commission in the area of enforcement as well, because the cost of enforcement also is huge, mind you. We have not even talked about the cost of enforcement. Let me give you an example. If you're going to deploy resources to enforce, to conduct a raid, for instance, right now as we speak, there's an operation going on somewhere in Lagos. Let's say, on the average, 1 million naira to conduct a raid. And you can't conduct a raid in one place or two places at the same time. And you can't conduct a raid in one. So if you want to multiply all the nooks and crannies of Nigeria where you're supposed to conduct a raid, 700 local governments in Nigeria, all through the country, 700 million for one raid, not for 2 or 3. And enforcement must be what? Consistent. You don't do one raid in one place and think that you have cleared up the market. So you can see the cost of enforcement on the other side staring us in the face. So I believe that building awareness and reorientating Nigerians who are the buying public about the evils and the scourge of piracy can go a long way, can be a revolution that copyright needs in Nigeria right now.
Well, sir, I remember that when you came on board, you tried a number of things to stem the tide of piracy. One was the introduction of holograms. How effective was that?
Now, we go back to memory lane. Hologram was conceived by the commission in collaboration with the industry to distinguish between pirated and original musical work at that time. And it started working.
How?
Along the line. I mean, if you remember in the 80s, even up until the 90s, if you buy a cassette that time, there was no CD at that time. Or CD was just gradually coming into the market at that time. You see a stamp, a sticker, a little sticker. So meaning that if you don't have that sticker, that CD, that cassette was likely to be pirated. At that level, even though it wasn't foolproof. But you could tell that every marketer, every distributor at that time, every artist or studio were buying in bulk the hologram, and they were affixing it on the cassette, and it was working to some extent. It's not that there was no piracy, but
it was reduced. Yeah.
It was working. What happened? Hologram was shut down. By who? By the industry that it was meant for.
How?
Over flimsy excuses of probably sharing formula issue of administration of it, and political issue that is really neither here nor there. A court injunction was against the commission halting and the implementation of the hologram scheme, and also hologram. That's how hologram died, and today it has not resurrected. Today, now we have different challenges of technology, challenges of production. That is what we now have in Nigeria. Replicating plants, turning out CDs because of the new introduction of a new audiovisual or optical disc material now that we have to deal with. So hologram will have probably phased out itself and give room to another system which we're now dealing with. But that died and it did not fulfill its purpose, at least conclusively at that time. Now we're dealing with a completely new environment.
But sir, that was probably, as you speak, due to lack of sufficient understanding from the operators themselves.
Absolutely, you're right.
So your task in enlightenment and advocacy seems to be uphill. You still have very far to go.
Exactly. We still have to build on that. We can't say that because you are carrying an awareness program, you just think it's for everybody. It's also for the operators, for the practitioners in that field to also understand their respective role. Now, after the hologram, we now have a new challenge in optical disc, and in the structure of piracy, we found out that there are two important elements: production on the one hand, distribution on the other hand. The commission believes that it has a role to play in the area of production because that's where those materials are actually churned out. If you are going to Alaba, if you are going to any of those markets to buy CD, they are produced from somewhere. Before now, maybe 20 years ago, or possibly 15 years ago, they were basically imported. You know that we didn't have the local productive capacity. Now we have a local productive capacity in those plants, which are in Nigeria now. We have now, as a commission, regulatory agency, regulating those replicating plants for the first time to address piracy from its source.
So, but the introduction of optical disc and,
yes,
and optical drive and advancing technology globally makes your job a lot more difficult because these replicating plants. I know that you have presence in the 6 geopolitical zones. Am I correct? But that means that replicating plants can be put anywhere. If the focus of the commission, if the pirators see that the focus of the commission is basically in one area, let's say Lagos, for example, then they can go to a place like Oron and still, since they have access to the plant, still produce. Before you realize that is the source, the market is flooded to an irredeemable extent. How do you intend to deal with that challenge?
What we have done in the last 1 or 2 years in the introduction of the new regulation is that we have started registering every single replicating plant in Nigeria. It's a huge facility. It's not a small facility at all. I mean, if you ask them, they will tell you it costs millions and millions in dollars to set up a replicating plant, a replicating facility. We have now started a regulatory regime where every single plant CD plant is registered by the Commission. We have on our record now about 14 or 15 CD plants registered with the Commission that we know of. So we can say those ones we know to respond to what you have just said. There may be other plants that are not registered that have gone underground as a result of this new regulation, which is not, of course, unlikely. But if we're talking about the regulation of these CD plants now, we're now dealing with piracy at its source, at its very root, at its source. Every single right owner or ease producer that is making order for replication of a CD now must produce authorization. Before you can go and produce any CD or any material, you must get, and every CD plant is aware of that right now. So there is some kind of, they know that it's no longer business as usual. That's another effort we're talking about. And
on the part of the Commission.
On the part of the Commission.
Yes.
And with of course, with the support of the industry, the right owners, and of course, the plants themselves. That is going on. That is a systemic effort, because sometimes you need to also strengthen the system, support the system to produce results. And the result of that will be seen shortly, because now we are talking about a significantly low level of non-compliance by these plants. That's not to say that we don't have, we have penalized many plants, we have shut down many plants, we are prosecuting some plants. So they know that it cannot be business as usual anymore from that point. But we need also to be supported by the industry on their own front to see how they can. Many of them will even go to the plants to parade each other's work. Many of them will even go to Alaba to sell their rights, basically like selling your birthright for peanuts. So that is undermining the modest effort that we're making to address that problem. Technology is another big problem. And technology is not a problem peculiar to Nigeria alone. As you know, the deployment of technology has been a major threat to the survival of intellectual property all over the world. And we're no less insulated from this challenge. And what we can do is begin to now see ahead. Nigeria today and some other countries in Africa may be the only ground and market that you can sell physical CD for the next 5 to 10 years. Frankly speaking.
Why?
Because of the penetration of internet penetration and technology. And I think we should take hold of this effort. All over the world now, artists and the critical community, they are complaining. You can download thousands of music without even going to any shop to buy it. But now you can still buy it from the market. So we have an advantage. We have an advantage now in terms of first looking ahead and see how we can now begin to deploy technological resources.
Yes, sir, but technological resources are also tied to your level of financial empowerment. You've said you have very grave challenges, human and material, and it seems to me as though the pirators and the people who dare to get involved illegally have not only more clout but have more capacity than you. So how do you intend? This is a time for reflection. Your 20th anniversary. You look at what you have achieved so far and how you intend to deal with the future. Do you see that as a gigantic battle dealing with the future?
Yes, it's an effort that should be geared towards that direction. Looking ahead, looking at the future of copyright, looking at the future of intellectual property in Nigeria. The most important thing now is to see the importance of intellectual property in Nigeria as part of the building block that we can use to attain development. We have to see that. If we don't see that, we will not make any effort into improving administration and enforcement of this. It's very critical to our developmental aspirations. If we identify that, then we have just started the journey. If you get that right, now say the next level is how do we now harness this? How do we now integrate it into the larger economic developmental plan of the country? That is the steps that we will make towards. But everybody must play its respective role. There's a role for public institutions. There's a role for the right holders, for the creative community. There's a role for even the media. There's a role for the Nigerian to play. And if we all play this role, just like in all other problems of our life in this country, I think the country will be a better place. We can do everything we can to enforce the law. I remember there was a time we were doing a public rally about 2-3 years ago, and we were running from Maryland to Obalende on the road, just to not to enforce or raid anyhow as such, but to create some kind of public awareness about street hawkers. Don't hawk this thing again. Don't do this. By the time we were returning later in the day from morning, by the time I was returning, those guys were back on the road.
I was just going to say,
so,
it didn't prove such an effective method.
Exactly. But then again, we keep at it. We cannot stop doing it. We have to keep going over it and over and over again. The message will go down.
Mr. Adewepo, at this point in time, we'll take a break. My producers are asking me so to do. Well, viewers, thank you very much for spending part of your time with us. This is One-on-One for this day with Mr. Adewepo, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission. We'll take a break here, and when we come back, we'll welcome your text messages and phone calls to make this program truly interactive. Please don't go away. Thank you very much for spending part of your time with us. If you're just joining us, this is One-on-One for this day with Mr. Adewepo, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission. Mr. Adewepo, yes, you're rolling out the drums, so to speak, and celebrating your 20th anniversary. And part of the process is reflection. Part is letting Nigerians know that we have to be more engaged in the enlightenment process. Now, but enforcement, as you said, is key, and that has to be revalidated time and again. Is enforcement, in your view, really the way out?
Enforcement is one of the ways out, one of the key ways. If you look at our initiative, the strategic action against piracy, there are three key elements. Number one is public enlightenment. Number two is enforcement. We identify enforcement as the hard part of promoting copyright. Hard in the sense that you need to enforce the law to serve as a deterrent to others. That's why our enforcement profile has increased in the recent past. And the end of that enforcement, the end in that process is prosecution. Now we have many prosecutions right now that we're charging because we want to prove a point to its logical conclusion, to say there's a jail term, there's a fine of so and so much, so that it can serve as so it has its own role. It has its own role to play, not just in the legal.
I'm sorry, sir. From your personal assessment,
yes,
has that prosecution served sufficiently as a deterrent?
We need to have more prosecution. We have, for instance, the Commission just established a prosecution department less than 3 years ago. So you can imagine, in its 20 years history, in response to that demand, that pressure that we need to enforce more, we just established a department that is serviced by very few lawyers. So the more of prosecution that we have, and the news go round into the public that, look, these people are prosecuting, and they mean it, and they are getting conviction here. We have, for instance, in the last 2-3 years, gotten about 5 convictions, which I believe should be put in the public domain, and we need more of that. Once we have more and more of that, it's part of the pressure.
Yes, sir. But have you caught any big fish? When you prosecute and send to jail some small player, of what real benefit is that? But maybe if you got one of the big players, one of the big names, maybe a multinational, and they can easily manipulate and buy their way out. But if you faced one of them and prosecuted them and had them you don't jail a corporate entity, but prosecute them.
Big fine.
Yes, a big fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Are you thinking of?
Yes, we will eventually get there because we have this. The entire landscape is so riddled with all kinds of forces and players and all of that. So by the time we get to that point when we will have said we have saturated our activity, we have so many case files, we have so many complaints, we have so many charges in court, and we face them, and we're able to narrow down to one or two big cases. For instance, in the history of the copyright administration enforcement, we have never had to charge big people to court, but we did with DSTV last year, multi-choice. That's a big player. We charged them to court. We have also, when there's a complaint over broadcast piracy and all of that, and at the end of the day, we file charges against them, and that was almost impossible many years before now.
How did it eventually play out?
Well, because the arena of broadcast piracy is different from the street or street piracy. At the end of the day, the other station, the other cable network had to reach some kind of agreement with them. It was basically settled. But the point was that the commission did its work.
Okay.
And it was almost impossible for the commission to do at that time. And there's all over the news at that time that you could not touch this, you could not do this. But we proved that point. Now coming back to the real underground piracy, we have also charged big replicating plants to court, and we're still prosecuting some of them. Some of them are Chinese with collaborators in Nigeria. But the bottom line is that we must keep up this pressure, and eventually we'll hit at it. We're going to hit at the root at it because it's a big network. It's an organized industry right now. Piracy is an organized industry that you cannot begin to scrap on the surface and pay lip service to. And I believe that by the time all of us come together when we're prosecuting, for instance, there's no way you can successfully prosecute a piracy case without the right owner, because he has to come to court to say to the court, this is my work, or these are my works, and I have not authorized so and so person to replicate it.
Would those works have been registered? I mean, for the author to enjoy copyright?
Copyright is not registrable.
Okay.
We say this all the time. That's part of one of the challenges of enforcement. It's not registrable. You have your copyright automatically. But what we have done as an institution.
How do you mean automatically, sir?
Once you write a poem or you write a music, you have copyright in the music. Without being registered, okay. There's no registration mechanism for copyright. It's
worldwide.
Worldwide, it's an international law that many countries have subscribed to. There is no formality to the enjoyment of copyright, so to say. So you have your right automatically. But again, that's a challenge, because if you want to enforce that work as a public institution, how do you know who owns the work? How do you know whether those works is original, the one you've been? Anyway, that's a different issue. So
no, sir, because it's very critical. Okay. Here, because you might produce a work here in Lagos, and somebody else in Kano, without talking or meeting you, is producing something similar. And let's say, for example, I, as a producer, put the work on stage, and in content, both your work and the other person's work happen to be similar. If there is copyright infringement, who now takes preeminence?
They will have to prove ownership. Both parties must prove ownership.
But since it's not registered, how do you prove ownership?
Exactly. But then they have to adduce evidence to show that, to prove ownership by either of them, and that's a tax of those who claim. The rival claimants must show to the court, or well, in any case, even to the commission, if it's required, that I am the owner. That's another challenge, because there's no registration mechanism.
Let's come back to the bear tax. We're talking about pirating music, CDs, and videos. What about ordinary everyday material like books? Most of the books, I'm told, I don't have ready statistics to back up my claim, but I'm told that most of the books on the market are pirated. How do you deal with that?
Same challenge of enforcement. Even educational books, educational texts. Usually in the book season, what the publishing industry call the book season, we're usually inundated with a lot of petitions and complaints and requests for enforcement by the publishing industry.
So I take it to mean that book season is when all the schools and universities resume?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for that information. So we have a lot of, that's when the Nigerian Publishing Association and various publishers actually come to us that, look, let's do this together, and we always respond to that. I mean, that's where you have a lot of pressure, and that shows you that the piracy we're dealing with is not just about entertainment, CD and video. Books, a major casualty. I remember I think last month, about 2-3 weeks ago, we confiscated over 50 million worth of pirated books in Ajegunle. I wish we could do that every day. Because, another fallout of our enforcement problem is that the pirates already know that this book can come more than once in a season. Because they know what it takes to come. So that's another challenge. So, but if you can put resources together and efforts together and say, let's plan, let's do this consistently, I believe it will have a far more greater impact than what we're doing, because this was 2-3 weeks ago. God knows what they're doing now.
Okay, let me ask you this. The government, in its wisdom and its far-sightedness, set up an organization eventually known as the Nigerian Copyright Commission. This commission will be a toothless bulldog if it is not adequately supported by the finances that it requires. Now, how are you going to make inroads into meeting those financial requirements?
First is to agitate for increased public funding. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and we're already doing that. But you don't get, government will tell you that you don't get what you want, you only get what you need. That's one. Two, the demand on public fund is so huge that you need to, there must be a proper allocation of resources by government. Number three, the industry of right owners must wake up to its responsibility. They have the primary obligation. We had a debate recently. I said, look, all these things that you are doing, fighting piracy and raiding the markets and all, whose work? These people should be able to fund you. They should be able to support you financially as well, because it's their works, it's their right. That's correct. I believe that's correct. So if you have a greater investment, because it's like an investment too. If you are creating and you are disseminating your creation, you should invest in it, in its protection. And I think that's a wise thing to do. So we also require, as part of our not just funding but support from the industry of writing, to be awake to its responsibility. There's nowhere in the world that piracy is fought alone or funded alone by any government in the world.
Yes, but why do you seem to have? I remember that many years ago, the music industry was a lot more organized. You had international players who had huge resources and could have positively supported an organization such as yours. Due to politics and economic downturn or whatever, they've withdrawn. So the average producer that you have in Nigeria today is probably one man or one small group trying to eke out a living. Where then do you expect them to get the resources to take care of their rights?
Yes, corporate Nigeria can help, can assist, but you cannot approach corporate Nigeria by yourself. It is the industry that must approach the creative industry to say, look, you are using us. We're relevant to your business, to your product. You have to help us.
Sir, that is like begging. That is like begging, and that can be demeaning. Isn't there something more compelling that can be done? By, for example, way of legislation. Because corporate Nigeria, I've been told by a number of people who've come on this program that they seem to have either donor negative realization, if there's any such expression, or they're just not interested. As long as their business is yielding them some profit, they really don't want to bend over backwards or make any extra effort to ensure that they protect the goose that lays the golden egg. Would legislation help?
Yes, legislation can help, but then you have to find a rationale for that. I mean, you cannot make a law that makes no sense in its practical realization. Like you rightly said, it might be begging or demeaning, but if you legislate such a thing under the law, how are you going to legislate that, for instance? I don't know how that will be done. That you create a special intellectual property tax of some sort. I don't know how that, but I will not even see. Yes, yeah, fine, thank you, but I don't see it as begging or demeaning. First, you can take it as corporate social responsibility. That is one. Second, even more compelling is the fact that you can tell them that you are using music to promote your trade. You are using film to promote your. It's logical that these are creative elements or inputs in your product, and therefore you must pay for it. It stands to reason. So that's something that we should work at, and I think that the corporate Nigeria should be awake to that responsibility because of the weak regulatory atmosphere, because of the low level of awareness. Maybe that's why they are getting away with it. But really, they are also culpable in this whole game.
But how do you deal with them? I know that with the advance of technology, new challenges are created, and you're expected to also, your mandate expects you to also oversee piracy in such areas as software development. How do you deal with that?
Yes, we're working with the Software Alliance to address that problem. We're also working with other similar institutions. For instance, you have the Cybercrime Working Group that are really even well equipped for that kind of thing. But it's something that we should begin to look at very seriously now, even though it has not really hit us as it has hit the international or other countries. But it's something that we should begin to seriously address in our effort, and we're already dealing with that. We're already looking at it to see how we can actually get hold of it by the time it comes, through various efforts. We've had seminars, we've had training programs, and we even have a proposal, amendment in the law to take care of this technological terrain, to see how we can now track down website, how we can enforce the law online or enforce the law in this cyberspace, so to say, outside of the normal traditional enforcement of the law.
Yes, I was just going to say, doesn't cyberspace and the internet create some greater challenge to your activities?
Yes,
since you say music can be downloaded without.
It does. It's a more. It puts more demand on you in terms of enforcement. From our perspective, we need to also take a cue from the advanced countries that are more or less fighting technological infringement, so to say, and how they're doing it. And those are the kind of things we should be looking at right now.
Sir, I know that your organization is, again, I say passionate about enforcing a copyright and protecting our artists and musicians. And you come up with different acronyms at different times. One was STRAP, Strategic Action Against Piracy. Was that just a slogan, or did it hold water?
Yes, that is the platform in which we're doing everything we're doing right now. It's just to give us an umbrella platform. It stands for the public-private partnership, knowing fully well that we cannot do this by ourselves. It's impossible to fight piracy from one source in one route. We need collaborations, we need partnerships, we need alliances to see that everybody plays its or our own role in the whole game. So it's not an acronym as such. It's actually the action plan which we're deploying on the mass enlightenment front, on the enforcement front, and on the front of making sure that we assist in the administration of copyright in Nigeria.
Your organization is 20 years old.
Yes.
You've been at the helm of affairs for about 5 years. The climate in which you became the Director General is slightly modified now. We're looking far into the 21st century. What is your vision?
Yes, the vision for the Copyright Commission right now is to see copyright as an enterprise, as a creative enterprise, contribute or plays its role as a tool for national economic development. And that's very critical, and it's possible. That's the vision. Simply because of the tremendous potential of copyright-based industry to their respective economy, and as it has been seen all over the world that they have used it and they have succeeded in using it. classic examples are the ones we know: United States of America, some countries in Europe. So we want to do the same thing here, to advance the cause of the creative enterprise, to say that creative enterprise pays not just for the creator, but for the society and for the economy. Secondly, in the area of enforcement, we want to come to such a time that we will see a manifest and drastic reduction in the level of piracy. That again is achievable. It may not have been eradicated completely, but to see a reduction such that the average creative community can now begin to see the fruits of their labor. And to bring it down, we want to see a time when an average pirate, from the top to the last, will watch their back before the pirate. I mean, that's when we can say the message has hit, not at the rate in which we have the level of infringement. So that's our vision, and we're working towards that. Thirdly, in the area of public enlightenment, we also want to build a culture. We mentioned this before, a culture of respect for creativity. We want an average Nigerian to begin to respect creativity. Music, in every area of human, to say this is creative work, I'm not going to touch this without adequate clearance. Again, it is part of the Nigerian branding thing, branding our values, our orientation, and can be done by how many Nigerians are you going to arrest? Individual Nigerians who have nothing to do with replicating or with trading in Alaba. How many? But they are the ones who are buying this at the end of the day. So we need to reorientate Nigerians to the value of creativity, the value of copyright and intellectual property. That is very key to nation building. It's very key to national economy and national development. And that, to us, is a vision that we hold very dearly and we're working towards.
Two questions here, sir. You keep mentioning Alaba. Is that the biggest market?
That is it. You know, sometimes they will probably think I'm going paranoid. I mean, I am, because I know what we have done. And I must say this with all sense of, I'm a Nigerian. I'm a public and civil servant. We have sent civil servants, defenseless civil servants to Alaba to protect creators. To tell Alaba, you can't do this. We're being shot at, we're being brutalized by these criminal elements, and who have declared themselves to be a republic within a republic, with powerful forces, with powerful connections. And we must say this as Nigerians, that we cannot accept this anymore.
But are you adequately protected, you as an individual and your workers as an organization? In other words, do you fear for your life? Do you wake up every day and watch your back?
I don't fear for my life, because I'm very passionate about this thing. I've lived all my life, all my adult life, as a corporate lawyer. So that's why government in its wisdom think that this man can do this job. So I've basically thrown my life into this with great passion, knowing fully well that this is one aspect of our country that can deliver some kind of dividend to this country.
So, but as a result of your qualification and your international exposure, you've seen how copyright is instituted and upheld in other nations across the world. How do we compare?
On the overall, Mr. Adewepo, I don't think we're doing that badly. And that's very interesting, because intellectual property, copyright, it's in its evolutionary stage. Really, it is, because it has evolved also in many other countries to such a point where they are today. We're at that stage now of its evolutionary process. And that's why 20 years is a good time to take stock and say, okay, let's look at the direction in which we'll be going and how we can reach the destination.
One last question. Under your leadership, the United States delisted us. I don't quite understand what happened. For the insight of our viewers, can you very quickly tell us what that means and what is the implication of the United States delisting Nigeria?
3 years going now, yeah. 2-3 years going now, for the first time in the history of copyright administration in Nigeria, Nigeria was removed from the list. They call it 301 list of countries that seem to condone piracy. Nigeria has been removed from that list. Third year in a row is a mark of recognition of our modest effort, not a mark of complete eradication. And I think I have to make this very clear. That, there is this, but no, a mark of recognition that for the first time there is political will and effort addressed at engaging this cankerworm, and I think that is commendable, and that was followed by a presidential commendation actually to the Copyright Commission that, oh, you have done this for Nigeria. And again, it means that we should not rest on our oars, and because of that, we are continuing to intensify our efforts in addressing that problem. It's also part of Nigerian branding. I mean, we're trying to repair Nigeria's image, re-launder Nigeria's image. It's good for Nigeria. That Nigeria is no longer regarded as a haven of piracy, so to say.
Mr. Adewepo, I think you have an uphill task, but I am also sure that you're up to the task. We wish you the very best in all your endeavors, and thank you very much for coming on the program, and wish you a beautiful 20th anniversary and more grease to your elbows. Well, viewers, thank you very much for spending part of your time with us. That has been one-on-one for this day with Mr. Adewepo, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission. They're celebrating their 20th year of existence. Thank you very much once again for your time. Today has been nice. Today has been fun. Tomorrow is another day.